There is this moment when I reach the end of our services on Shabbat or Yom Kippur, and I read out the names of our yard site list. And many of those names I don't know, not personally. But then I'll reach the name of someone who I did know, someone who I knew well, someone I laughed with, someone I had Shabbat lunch with, someone who shared with me so much of who they were. And when I read that name, my voice gets caught in my throat. And instinctively, I lift my head and look out here, to their seat, to where they used to sit. And I can see them, right where I remember them. I can see them. I can see Florence Good waving at me and schmoozing with everyone in her row. I can see Larry Jonas trying to make me laugh while making the announcements and succeeding 100% of the time. I can see Ruthie Goldstein giving me a big smile while simultaneously trying to get me to fix my tie. I can see them, right where I remember them. Sometimes people ask me what it's like to be a rabbi. And there are lots of ways I think that I could answer because it's complicated. There are times when it is really hard. But when I'm asked, the first thing that pops into my head is how I feel the overwhelming majority of the time. What is it like to be a rabbi? It is an honor. It is an honor because my job is, yes, to teach, to pray, to counsel, to advise, but first and foremost, my job is to remember, to listen to keep, and to tell stories. Your stories. And that is a blessing. That is a gift that is priceless. And at the same time, it is a gift that comes with heartbreak. Because remembering, by its nature, and this is an incredible understatement, is emotional. Remembering is to hear a name and have a life flash before your eyes. It is to hear a name and see them. So close, so real, you feel like you can touch them because their story lives on even when their body does not. I can see them. And I thank God every day that I can see them. This is what it means to be a rabbi. But it is also what it means to be a Jew. Some 3,500 years ago, our ancestors saw the rise of empires. They saw a world filled with wonders that we still read about today. Their neighbors built pyramids, arenas, and ziggurats that looked like they were made by giants. Palaces covered inside and out in gold and silver. They saw the world at its most impressive, and what they, our ancestors, gave to a world that seemingly had everything was a story. While the rest of the world built stacks of sand and stone, of mortar and wood, our ancestors focused on a different type of building. What they poured their hearts into, what they lived for, what they died for, what they gave us, and what they give us is Torah. The other nations of the world made their mark with their hands. We made our mark with our voice, with our song, with the telling and retelling and dissecting and analyzing and reanalyzing and then retelling again of our story. Because we knew something very profound. We knew that buildings could be torn down. We knew that bodies would age and die. But stories are eternal. In Judaism, we are radically focused on the here and now. We spoke about this on Rosh Hashanah. We don't know what comes next. We don't know what lies ahead, and so it is incumbent upon us to live with meaning each and every day. Yet at the same time, and this might feel like a paradox, but at the same time, it is only through our past, only through our story, that we have the language, the tools, and the roadmap to live in the profundity of the present. And it is only through our past that we are preserved, sustained, and enriched so that we might know our future. It's a beautiful paradox. And we feel it prominently here and now during these awesome and sacred days of tshuva and atonement. We just heard it sung. On Rosh Hashanah it is written. On Yom Kippur it is sealed. On Rosh Hashanah we are shaken from our slumber and tasked with writing our Sefer Chaim, our book of life. On Yom Kippur we are reminded that the books we write are not ours alone, that they are part of a cosmic library known as Am Yisrael, known as the people of Israel, and that while the authors pass from this world to the next, the books, the stories, live on. On Rosh Hashanah, we remember to live for right now. On Yom Kippur, we remember that there is no now without a then. Our present is only possible when it is fueled by the fire of our past, because when we zachor, this powerful Hebrew word that we shakily translate as remember or recall, it's the same root as yizkar, the service that we are about to go into in a few minutes. We don't simply remember when we zachor. We don't simply remember. We remember actively. We remember with passion. We break a glass at our wedding to remember the destruction of the Holy Temple. We light candles throughout the 8 nights of Hanukkah to remember the miracle that kept the menorah burning. When the Hasmoneans reclaimed that same temple. We plant trees, we wear costumes, we eat special foods, we drink special drinks, all so that we can remember. And we remember so that we may be renewed. We have to remember. And in order to remember, we have to tell our stories. On Rosh Hashanah, Rabbi Starr spoke beautifully and powerfully about the religious and spiritual crisis we are facing now as Jews in the 21st century. The drop in institutional Jewish membership, the decline in prayer and synagogue attendance. We are indeed in the midst of a reverse exodus, marching away from the parted waters of our Jewish journey rather than boldly walking into the unknown with the hope and the promise of text, tradition, peoplehood, family. But more than the dwindling synagogue membership, more than negative trends in Hebrew school enrollment or Shabbat or Kashrut observance, I'm troubled by the declining numbers and simple expressions of Jewish identity and culture. When the 2020 Pew report came out, Jewish professionals, clergy, and lay leaders sounded the alarm bells when they saw the numbers of unaffiliated Jews and non-religious Jews. And rightfully so. But more alarming to me is the last section of that survey. The section that shows that fewer and fewer Jews are reading Jewish newspapers or websites or seeking out Jewish news online. That the great majority of Jews aren't listening to any Jewish or Israeli music. And that only a small number of Jews are engaging in online conversation about Judaism or being Jewish. Yes, we have an institutional problem. But we have a Jewish institutional problem because we have a Jewish literacy problem. And we have a Jewish literacy problem because we have a Jewish pride problem. And we have a Jewish pride problem because we have a Jewish story problem. We need to talk about who we are. We need to talk about where we come from. We need to tell our stories because we are storytellers. That is who we are as Jews. That is Torah. That is our contribution to the world. And yet we're having a hard time remembering. Far too often it happens at a Shiva house that someone stands up and tells a beautiful reflection about the person who passed, only for the majority of the family members to say, "Wow, I didn't know that story." Far too often do I hear a bar bat mitzvah on our bima, a parent share a heartfelt message to their child about becoming a Jewish adult, only for their child to respond by saying, "Did you have a bar mitzvah? Did you have a bat mitzvah?" And far too often does it happen around our tables at Pesach Seder, the quintessence of our peoplehood, the mitzvah to sit down together and tell our story, that we get to the four children in our Haggadah, when the quote-unquote wicked child says, "What does this all mean to you?" And we just read the text that's there in the next paragraph, rather than answering the question for ourselves. What does all of this mean to you? What does all of this mean to you? I'm asking. Our children are asking. And we need to answer. And I think that answer should be clear. What does this mean to us? It means everything. Let me tell you why, by telling you a story. It is a story of a boy named Joseph. Now, Joseph is a lot of things, but subtle is not one of them. See, Joseph has this gift, a gift to be able to dream and then interpret those dreams as a type of prophecy. But the problem is, he talks about it a little too much, and it drives his brothers absolutely crazy. So they decide to sell him into slavery to a caravan of Ishmaelites who bring him to Egypt, where he becomes a house servant to a powerful man named Potiphar. And things get pretty awkward in Potiphar's house rather quickly, and Joseph is thrown into prison. As he awaits his fate, he puts his gift to use by interpreting the dreams of two fellow prisoners, one of whom, after being spared judgment, relays Joseph's amazing gift to Pharaoh himself. Intrigued, Pharaoh brings Joseph to his throne and asks him to interpret some dreams he has been dreaming for some time. And Joseph does. He sees them for what they are, and he conveys to Pharaoh that they represent years of bounty followed by years of famine, and that if Pharaoh wants to save his people, he will have to store extra food because 7 years of hardship are on their way. Pharaoh heeds Joseph's words and sets him at his side as one of his top advisors. And when that famine comes, because of course that famine comes, a family of Hebrews ventures down to Egypt to ask for food so that they may survive. That family is Joseph's family. His brothers, the same ones who sold him to slavery all of those years ago. And after a tense back and forth where the brothers don't recognize Joseph until he finally reveals himself, there's a beautiful reunion, a great moment of tshuva and repentance and forgiveness, and then Joseph brings the entirety of his family to join him in Egypt. They do. And for the remainder of their lives, they live in happiness and prosperity. And then in his last days, Joseph calls to his brothers, and he calls them to his bedside, letting them know that he is about to die. And this is where the story begins. Not where it ends. This is where it begins. Because in that moment, Joseph makes a request from his brothers. one that forever changes the course of human history. He looks them in their eyes and says to them, Anochi met, ve'elokim pakod yivkod etchem. I am about to die, but God will see you. God will hear you, God will embrace you, and God will take you up out of this land and bring you to the land promised to our fathers. And when God does, when that journey begins, you shall carry up my bones as you head into the unknown. And sure enough, when God redeems the Israelites, parting the sea and bringing them out of the land of bondage with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, what do the Israelites take with them? The bones of Joseph. And you know what? And we've been carrying them with us ever since. Because the bones of Joseph are not just the physical bones that needed to be buried in Eretz Yisrael. They are Joseph's dreams. The dreams that saved him from death. The dreams that he passed on to his brothers, to their children and grandchildren. The dreams that turned into stories, and the stories that turned into whispers of hope when the world turned into darkness. We carried them. We carried them through the wilderness. We carried them when we finally settled in that land flowing with milk and honey, and we carried them when that land was razed, pillaged, and desecrated. We carried those bones with us into diaspora, into Spain and Portugal, into France and Germany, into the Shtetl of Russia and Poland. We carried them when our lights burned bright, when we were allowed to live in peace, and we carried them when time and time again the world did its best to snuff out that light and reduce us to ashes. Despite their best efforts, we carry them still. Because buildings can be torn down, bodies can age and die, but stories are eternal. We carry the bones because that is who we are. We are mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, grandparents and children. We are doctors and teachers, lawyers and contractors, nurses and artists. We are Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi. We are Jews by blood and we are Jews by choice. But first, before anything else, we are storytellers. We are bone carriers. What does all of this mean to us? Everything. It means everything. Today on Yom Kippur, we are given a sacred task. We are asked to remember. We are asked to keep the stories alive. And we must. At our Shabbat and Yom Tov tables, yes, and at our Shiva houses, of course, but also Stam, for no reason at all, to tell our stories for the sake of telling our stories. Because when we do, we tear down the constricting confines of time and exist in eternity. We defy statistics and expectations. We buck trends and estimations. We shock the world. And we carry on. We carry on. When I look out here today, I can see them. I can see Kim Levin sitting proudly right in the middle of her beautiful family. I can see Lenny Lockover pulling out of his pocket an article he printed for me to read, in Hebrew, of course, and one he probably wrote himself. And I can see the Rebbitzin. I can see Lipsa Groner smiling. Her eyes filled with pride as she sees the shul she loves filled with people coming together for the sake of Torah and peoplehood. I see so many stories, so many beautiful and priceless stories, and I thank God every day that I can see them. but I want the world to see them. I want everyone to see who we are, how filled with love and appreciation we are, how proud we are, and how defiant and sacredly stubborn we are. I want them to see this so that they will continue to shake their heads in astonishment, mystified by the fact that we are still here and that we aren't going anywhere. I want them to see so that when they ask us, how do you do it? How do you live? How do you survive against all the odds? We'll all immediately know the answer. And we will say in unison, because we are Jews, and this is what Jews do. We remember. We tell stories because stories are eternal. We are Jews, and we carry the bones.